welcome all. My name is Leonardo Rivas. I'm the director of the Latin American program here at the Carr-Ryan Center. And Carlos Blanco will talk today about Venezuela. As you know, Venezuela is having an election, a crucial election this coming Sunday, and it will be one of the most important elections in Latin America in the last years, and with a huge impact. And for that we have here Carlos Blanco. Carlos is a very, I would say, a very good expression of a combination of intellectuals in Venezuela. He is related to journalism, to academia, and to politics. And he's been deeply involved in the three, both directing magazines and journals, and teaching at University of in Venezuela, and now he's a visiting professor at Boston University. And of course in politics he was related for many years to political movements in Venezuela, more inclined to the left. And then afterwards he was part of a very important movement related with decentralization, and he was the head of a special office that was created in Venezuela to decentralize and to give government to local, and he was associated with that reform. And then he became a minister of decentralization. So it is really my great pleasure to have Carlos, and I would say he's one of the, he also writes in El Universal an op-ed every Sunday, which is very widely read. And well, it's my pleasure to have Carlos here and talk about his impressions about the Venezuelan elections.
Thank you, Leonardo. Well, thank you to the Carr Center, Leonardo and Jit, and all of you for having me here today. I'm going to talk about Venezuelan elections that are going to be held within 6 days. So it is pretty difficult to talk about this event that is so close, because Venezuela, as you know, is a very polarized society. Everyone, almost everyone, has taken sides, and myself as well. I'm part of the opposition, as Leonardo said. And also, it is sometimes easier to forecast things within a year or 2 years than within a week. Not because you're going to be more accurate within a year or 2 years, but maybe we won't be together to see the mistakes we have committed in forecasting. So, I'm going to talk about what is going to, some of the elements that we have in Venezuela regarding to the situation for this coming Sunday. I'm going to talk like an impressionist vision of the elections, what the opposition wants, what we know, what we assume, what we know but prefer to ignore, what we don't know but think we do know, and what we don't know. With some caveats, I'm not predicting what is going to happen. And I'm not having this session as propaganda for my point of view. And this is very important, as you all know. It's very difficult, impossible, I would say, to grab every element of reality, because there are ongoing processes in Venezuela. Nowadays, we don't know what is happening. For instance, the impact of the demonstration that Capriles had yesterday. We don't know what would be the impact of the demonstration that Chavez is going to have this Thursday in the same place. You know, this is an ongoing process, and I'm just wanting to give you some elements of this situation. Of course, the government wants to win, and Chavez is promising that he's going to continue his revolution, to renovate his government, and to change some of the things that are wrong, his mistakes. He promised that yesterday. We're going to have a government anew, and we're going to change what needs to be changed. The opposition, of course, wants the electoral victory of Capriles, but here comes something interesting. A victory so decisive that Chavez would even intend to question it. That's something important for the opposition nowadays, to have Capriles winning without doubts. That's what the opposition wants. And the most important message is not about the program, Capriles' program, what he's going to do if he is president. The most important issue is about peace, inclusion, reconstruction of the country. And Venezuelans and the opposition side would be pleased to have, you know, a peaceful transition and a peaceful country. What we know, the regime has a lot of trouble, a lot of contradictions. 14 years is a lot. And pursuing the revolution that Chavez set as a goal implied to have a kind of institutional destruction of institutions, because that was needed for revolution. For instance, when we say oil industry in Venezuela is badly damaged, is kind of point of view. But for many people, the new PDVSA, the new oil industry, has just doing what the revolution needs, you know, to finance social programs, to be on the side of the people and on the side of the poor. So from a point of view, Chavez's regime is in a very bad shape. And also his physical health. It's clear for anyone that Chavez has a problem with his cancer. We cannot forecast how long he will last. He is going to die soon, but you know, his electoral campaign shows that he is troubled with a health situation. Many Venezuelans, including Chavistas, seem to be, you know, fed up. There is some situation of tiredness. People, you know, this polarized country is having people, you know, just tired of this situation for some long time. Capriles, coming from the primaries, became the leader of the opposition. There's no disputes about this. He is recognized by everyone that he is the leader. And he has been doing a, you know, astonishing campaign. I didn't vote and I didn't support him in the primaries because I thought he wouldn't have the character to confront Chavez because he was talking about inclusion, but not, you know, having a strong stance against Chavez. But he changed. He is now a powerful leader. He represents, you know, what the opposition in Venezuela wants. But here we have a problem. For today, Chavez leads most of the polls. We'd like to see encuestas. This is a compilation of surveys from Reuters and was compiled by this lady. We have here the most recent polls. Here, with a blue arrow, is what the opposition thinks is survey close to Capriles. Actually, this is a pollster that Capriles campaign headquarters contracted. This is seen as part of the government or being on the side of the government, and the yellow ones kind of neutral. The government says all the polls are correct, but the first one. The opposition says, well, some are on the governmental side, some are neutral. But from the opposition viewpoint, Consultores 21 says that Capriles is now leading the polls. We'll see another survey, recent survey of Consultores 21. Interlaces says the gap is, you know, wide, 52-34. In that analysis, the kind of neutral, biased to Chavez, but consulted by many leaders of the opposition. The last, actually, there is another one that says, please, that analysis. Yes, this one that says is 10%. This is the most recent. This is close to the opposition too. Says Capriles is going up. It's close to Chavez. This is actually is from a governmental source. The difference is, you know, wide. And this IVAD is from people, former opposition people that are now close to the government. Says the gap is almost 18%, and this is from a former minister of Chavez that says this is the difference. This is what we have. With the exception of the first one, Consultores 21, we have this result. Let's go to the Consultores 21, the other one, please. In the slide 23, please.
Are there any non-Venezuelan polls?
Huh?
Have there been any non-Venezuelan polls?
As far as I know. Well, there is Greenberg, that is working with Capriles, is an advisor of Capriles, but he is working with Consultores 21.
With the data, they use the data.
With the data of Consultores 21, but having a different reading of the data. Here is the simulation of the electoral act. This is 1,500 people surveyed, and the margin of error is 2.7%. Next one, please. This is people putting actual votes in a ballot. this is the difference between Capriles and Chavez, more than the margin of error. Let's continue. This is a traditional way asking, people openly what they think, and Capriles is leading, but within the margin of error. Next one, please. This is the traditional question, and this is with the ballot in the simulation. This is what Consultores 21 says. Let's go back to the slides, please. So, we don't know, according to the polls, what the situation is right now. The feeling in the streets, in the demonstrations, and what many people think is that Capriles is going up and up and up. And Chavez's government and Chavez's campaign seem to be, erratic, not very clear in their purposes, going back and forth. That's the sensation. But the polls are saying this. So we have a problem here. La anterior. No. Más. Déjame, yo no lo tengo aquí. What we assume. Everybody is thinking in Venezuela about what's going to happen this Sunday. Because the government says the opposition is going to call fraud the results of the election. And the opposition thinks that there is a possibility that with a narrow margin, the government will try to grab the election. That's the situation. The government thinks, Chavez's people think they're going to win. And most of the opposition people think Capriles is going to win. The margins of doubts are too small on either side. That's a real problem for that day. What I think is that winning Capriles, we will have that information around 2, 3, 4 p.m. that day, very quick. There are a lot of quick counts and exit polls and everything to know if the opposition who wins in that day. If Capriles wins, we think, I think the Electoral Council could recognize it rapidly if Capriles and his group, his advisors, go quickly to the media, international media, to say, here are the figures, the numbers that we have. In Venezuela, you cannot say the results until the Electoral Council gives the first official information. That could be at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 10 p.m., 12 p.m., nobody knows. This is another assumption. The armed forces are going to respect the results if Capriles wins. Because the group, the small group of Chavez allies, it cannot say, well, we're going to not to recognize what the Electoral Council would say. And there is another another concern. If there is a narrow margin, winning either one, people in the opposition would think there was a fraud committed, and people in the government would think the same thing. That's a very, very problematic situation that we could have. What we know, but prefer to ignore. You know, we're behaving in Venezuela like if we have, you know, normal elections, Obama and Romy and this and that and Kirchner and the other one. You know, that's not the case. Chavez is doing everything to stay in power by both legal or illegal, violent or non-violent means. And the rationale of this is very, very, very clear. He is leading a revolution. A revolution cannot be stopped, shouldn't be stopped by, you know, institutional meddling. He should continue his revolution and not to be stopped by this electoral issue. By the way, Fidel Castro said to, please come in. There was a meeting several years ago between Chavez, Luis Miquelena, his former Minister of Interior, and Fidel Castro and Margarita Ay. And, well, now Luis Miquelena is not with Chavez, but at that time, and he told me this. And Fidel Castro openly told Chavez and Luis, you only go to elections if you're going to win it. If not, you don't go. That was the mistake of Daniel Ortega in the 1980s. So this idea, if you think you're doing a revolution and you want to preserve it, you have to try to keep power. Many people think that Chavez will try to alter in some way the results of the election if he is not winning. He will have information in real time because the government controls everything about the electoral machines, so they could try. Let me say, the opposition says, the people involved in these issues, in electoral issues, that technically it is almost impossible to change, you know, the electronic thing for having different results. But I have some information, for instance, that some Chavistas in not urban places are trying to tell some of the opposition witnesses in the mesas de votación, well, you shouldn't come. And in the borders, in the south border, some of the guerrillas, Venezuelan guerrillas people, Frente Fuerzas Bolivarianas de Liberación, would visit these people, saying, stay at home, don't come. How many votes are those? I don't know. But could be not 1 million, but thousands of votes. We don't know as of today what's the situation in the polls. Greenberg and Consultores 21 say that now Capriles is leading the polls. It's going up, and Chavez is going down. Some friends say that yesterday there was a huge demonstration in Caracas, the biggest in years. So people say, well, this says something. This shows that Capriles has a momentum, and that's real. There's a momentum for Capriles. And the campaign for Chavez is, as I said, is going back and forth because his health situation, and sometimes they say the revolution is not going to be stopped. Sometimes they say, well, we're going to recognize any result that comes from the election. There's something. Capriles is the one to call whatever is going to be done on this Sunday. If he says we won, everybody would say in the opposition won. If he recognizes, if he concedes, many people will get angry, but that would be the result. And the problem is, if there is a narrow margin for Chavez, and the opposition thinks it won, that would be a major problem. Because people are going spontaneously to the streets. That's for sure. If, let me repeat, if the opposition people think that Chavez was defeated and Chavez is not recognizing the results, that would be terrible. Is there any military support for a street protest against the elections being rigged? Some say yes, because there are institutional military officers that would not accept fraud. That's something, that's speculation. I am worried about this. Who can make that call on a responsible manner with no planning, as far as I know? How can you call people to the streets to confront a government, some very powerful armed groups that killed 2 days ago 3 people in Barinas, just the shooting in the streets? There was a campaign demonstration for Capriles, and some people, some Chavistas tried to stop it and killed 3 members of the opposition 2 days ago. If Chavez wins, what should Capriles do after saying that he was going to win? That he is winning. And when he assured,
Today he said he was going to win with 1 million votes margin.
yeah, maybe that's happening, but I don't know data on that. I have what I'm saying here. What we don't know is the degree of fear on voters. We have been saying for years that the government tries to prevent people voting for the opposition, public employees, contractors with the state, and whatever. And there have been some proof of it, with lists of opposition voters and other tools. But there is a question. Would be some fear of voting for Chavez in Chavistas voters due to this situation in which the opposition is right now, you know, we're going to win, we're going to win. Are there some Chavistas with fear? I don't know, but that's a question that I like to present here. The other one is the degree of indecision of the undecided. Because the distance between the polls I showed you is because where the gap is big, what you have there is 10 to 14, 15 undecided people. Are undecided really undecided as of today? I would say Capriles could win if there is a landslide these days. There are some, at least 2 polls, but I don't have the results. They're going to have results this Wednesday, showing what is happening these days. I talked to an opposition leader yesterday. He is with Chavez, with Capriles, but reluctantly, because he hasn't been incorporated in the group that leads the campaign. And he told me, Capriles is going to lose. Because the gap is from 8 to 16%, any figure of that. And the gap cannot be filled in a week. I talked to 3 weeks ago, let me say, to a very close advisor of Capriles, and he was very, very down to earth. We can win, we could win, but we haven't yet. We are in that path, but not yet. But something has happened in these 3 weeks, favorable to Capriles. Here is another issue. As people with some knowledge of what is happening in Venezuela with the armed Chavistas paramilitary groups, they're real groups, and they're as close to the presidential palace as 1 mile. They work there. There are La Piedrita, Tupamaros, Alexis Vive, other groups, are armed groups. And they work as, you know, with a group of motorcycles, armed groups, to create some situations. Is that new? Would they act that way? They say, we're going to prevent any fraud attempt from the opposition. But you know what that could mean. And here is a question for which I don't have clear answers. Chavez, at the beginning, was the president, had a control of the government. Within years, he had the control of the state. Within more years, had the control of some other groups and institutions of the society. And after 14 years, is Venezuela with Chavez system, meaning that even people not content with Chavez, but working in Venezuela as entrepreneurs or members of the elite, can accept to work with Chavez because could be more dangerous, impossible to forecast, chaotic, what would happen if Chavez leaves the government in a turmoil. I don't have answers, but I think that's something to think about. I'm going to conclude now saying that according to what is happening in Venezuelan cities with electoral campaign, Capriles has been, has become a phenomenon, an electoral phenomenon. But the polls are there. So I have doubts because, and I'm going to finish with an anecdote. I came from Caracas Wednesday. I'm going to Caracas in 2 days. And I was there for almost a month. I met many people. I went to different places. And I found one Chavista. Just one. The easy reflection about this is, wow, the Chavistas have disappeared. The other reflection is my social circles. Different from what the country is. And I think this last assessment is correct. I cannot tell what is going to happen based on my just open perception of being in Venezuela and streets going here and there. So I think there is a chance for Capriles if there is an unknown avalanche these days. Could be, but I'm not sure. That's it.
My name is David Abel. I'm a Neiman Fellow. I actually was in Caracas 14 years ago when Enrique Capriles was kicked out of the Cámara de Diputados.
Yeah.
And
He was president.
He was speaker, president, right. I interviewed him when the National Guard surrounded the whole entire palace or Congress, and he was tossed out. So I'm not surprised today to see where he is. I have a few questions. First of all, I have not followed this campaign. I'm wondering if you could give us some sense of what the rhetoric has been like, if it's venomous, how the rhetoric compares between both sides. That's my first question. Second question is, can you give us a sense of whether you think civil war is really a possibility, what that would potentially look like, regardless of who wins? And the final question is, if Chavez does win, but dies, what happens?
Well,
That's an entire,
that's another
concept.
Sure, I'm
But-
sure.
but-
No
but
problem.
very good question, thank you.
Yes.
The rhetoric in the campaign. Capriles had two times. The first one, after he won the primaries, was inclusion, peace. I'm not going to attack the other side. And then, I don't know if due to criticism on him or change in his electoral strategy, he changed to more powerful attacks on Chavez, based on results. You promise security, this is what we have. You promise this, and this is what we have. I would say effectively. That's Chavez is, his rhetoric is the oligarchies, the bourgeoisie, imperialism is trying to grab the presidency in Venezuela to go back to our awful past. And he says, these people are offering something like we have offered, but that's just a mask to bring Chavistas on their side. That's what Chavez is saying. And he is, talking to the people about sentiments, about how he loves the Venezuelans and the like. About civil war.
Can I just ask, have there been ad hominem attacks, like personal sort of, vengeful language?
From Chavez, yes.
Oh,
No doubt. And not from Capriles. He talks about the other candidates. He doesn't mention Chavez by his name. Civil war. Well, there are big words to talk about. I think we have a low-intensity civil war in Venezuela since some years ago. Not noticed because there are criminal gangs and the like. That's something happening. We have these gangs, mafias. When you have a non-institutional state like Venezuela is now, these institutions have been destroyed, and no institutions have been, built in this process. When you don't have that kind of a solid institution, what you have is mafias. In some sense, this is a Latin American Russia for many purposes. What could happen? I'm not sure. Because for a civil war, well, actually called civil war without military is not a civil war. You have to have militaries, the military split, and you have two sides. And I don't know if the armed forces are going to get divided to that extent. I'm not sure to properly answer that question. The third one, what I see, one scenario that I see is Chavez could win by a narrow margin, but the transition won't stop because he is too ill to continue governing Venezuela for a long time. And the transition could come next year in another setting if Chavez wins for a narrow margin, which is the margin that I foresee as of today. So if I think Chavez is pretty ill, and that's going to be the most important variable from now on if Chavez wins the election.
I'm Roger Whalen, and I'm from Santa Barbara, California. I come here a couple months a year just to hear gentlemen like this give a presentation. Thank you very much for that presentation. My question and your anecdote at the very end fit into this question, stimulated the question. In our society, we'll have pollsters. Rasmussen will err slightly to the right. Some would say more than slightly. We have others that will err a little to the left. Many of the pollsters will have a right-wing publication like the Journal team up with a left-wing publication, or a left-of-center publication, so that they'll have more credibility. And then they'll outline who they have polled and how did they do it. Did they do it with robocalls? Did they do it with just a telephone call? Did they do it door-to-door? How did they ask their question? Did they get most likely voters? Did they get just registered voters? Did they not delineate at all? All those questions are really important when you're studying these polls. How do most of your pollsters go after the information?
Well, they all have the information that you requested. The problem is we don't know if that is reliable. They have puedes poner consultores 21, the numbers of people surveyed, the methodology, the way in which it has been done, and la primera, o la segunda. You see, this is Consultores 21, and you see all the information you need. Dates, the number of cases, the margin of error, and you have that,
If it's stratified or...
yeah. But the problem here with these polls in Venezuela is that there are a lot of undecided people. So some say the undecided are undecided, or were undecided when these polls were carried out. But other people say, well, specific polls have this huge undecided percentage to explain why they were wrong. The results were different from those they were saying were going to be. And they would say the undecided moved to this side at the end of the week. So there are not, I wouldn't say reliable polls, but I would say all polls are under suspicion due to this situation.
Well, yeah, and then
Nora White's Munoz, I'm also a Neiman Fellow, and I cover U.S. Latin American relations for the Associated Press. And I wondered what happens, the scenarios you gave were such that it would be very clear who the early winner is. What happens if it's not, if you have something like a Bush score where it does go very late and it's unclear? And also, what if early on there are anomalies at certain precincts where machines aren't working or people aren't allowed in? How do you think the two sides will deal with those problems?
Well, there are technical problems. The calculation on the time length of people voting is 90 seconds. That gives from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. almost 66% of the electoral race. According to the law, the president of the mesa can prolong if there are people in the queues until the last one. But we have some precedents on this in one of the referendums. The Electoral Council extended the voting time once and twice, even not having people in many mesas. And people suspected, many people suspected that there was a time when some kind of fraud was committed. Now, the member of the opposition that is in the electoral council is 1 out of 5, guarantees that there is no possibility of fraud due to the electronic process. And the opposition leaders say the vote is secret and there is no possibility of changing people's vote. So they're guaranteeing this process. I don't believe in that, but that's what the opposition believes. And so we can have time, where things can be managed, changed, or even violent people going to the mesas, to the booth where people are voting to create situations. But we don't know yet. That is a possibility that has happened, but we don't know.
But what about if it's not decided and, there isn't a clear cut and it's so close that it goes very late?
Could be violence. And I think that's the most important issue. And because of that, I think the electoral council will call early. I think that they are trying to say something before 11:30 that night. I think that's the closest approach that they will have.
Here,
I think the young lady from Venezuela.
pardon me?
I was going to defer to the young lady from Venezuela. You don't ask. Sorry. So, my name is Denise Stilson. I'm the executive director for the Harvard Square Business Association. And I've visited Venezuela twice in the past 5 years, once in 2007 and then again in 2010. And I've been a host mother to Venezuelan students for the past 5 years. Having traveled there, the country is clearly falling apart. There's so little that works there, from healthcare to education. The environment is just, there's things that are being spewed into the environment. There's graffiti, there's trash, the national monuments, the streets, the lack of empathy, it seems to me, from the people who are in favor of Capriles. There's so many things that are wrong. I wonder, does Capriles have the capacity to restore safety, infrastructure, education, healthcare, all of these things? It's a country that is literally just falling apart, but has the capacity to be incredibly, incredibly beautiful. There's just so many things that are wrong, and I witnessed it, from Margarita to the Andes, from, Acarigua to Barquisimeto, Valencia, Maracoy. We traveled all over the place. It's just a country in ruin, and I just wonder, does he have the capacity? Is there enough strength there to restore it?
Well, I agree with you. That's my vision on Venezuela. But the problem is that not everyone sees that. Because when we see destruction, some other people see the way in which revolutions work. When we see the kind of for instance, I always put the example of PDVSA that I mentioned earlier, the oil industry. There were more than 40,000 workers in 2002. They were expelled. They expelled more than 20,000 people. And now PDVSA has more of 120,000 people, because many of the social programs are added to the PDVSA, and the beneficiaries of these programs are part of the payroll of PDVSA. So their vision is different. They are for the first time they have ownership on oil, on Venezuelan oil. And I think there is a problem here, a theoretical problem. I don't know, I won't go further on this, but when we think in poverty, and in the poorest people not having this and that and that and that, we don't think and what the poor actually have, what they have. They don't have many things, but they have some things. Networks, some connections to the state, some structures of solidarity, working structures. And when we apply some of our concepts to this social sectors, not always we're accurate in what is happening there. And I think that's one thing. And the other thing is that Chavez's social base is mostly in the informal sector. And that's something that hasn't been researched in Venezuela, and I think in some extent in Latin America. What's the political bias of this sector? How Chavez, of course, Chavez is not the one who gave the Venezuelan poor many things, because 40 years of democracy built a powerful middle class. But Chavez is giving them a narrative, reasons, if not reason. He has politicized this movement that was orphaned, politically orphaned. So there are some things that need to be researched to understand why Chavez, even if he loses 44% of Venezuelans supporting this guy, it's not just, something that happened suddenly. These comments are for reflection, for discussion, I'm not very sure about what's going to be the outcome.
Peter, you
My name is Peter DeShazer. I work at Harvard. I'm wondering to what extent conditions really have changed in the way the opposition is perceived in Venezuela, and how they are conducting the campaign. Clearly, Capriles seems to be surging, and that's, I think, pretty straightforward. In the past, the opposition would automatically say the vote was fraudulent, or that the vote wasn't secret, and that probably hurt them over time. I assume they're no longer sort of saying, they're no longer casting in a lot of doubt the voting procedure itself. It was interesting, the study that Wildenberg and Bernardo Arriagada did. Their conclusion was that widespread fraud would be impossible without being detected. That it could not be carried out without it being detected, but around the edges, especially in rural areas, there were some possible mechanisms. the extent that the opposition has been able to reinforce the message that they're not going to take away the benefits that Chavez has brought to especially the very urban poor. Do you think that they're perceived differently to the extent that that really will make a big difference this time around? Do you think that people will vote with more confidence, that their vote is going to really count? Do you think all of that will really have an effect?
Well, regarding to the electoral procedures, the opposition is not saying that it's going to be fraud.
They did in the past.
Yes. And actually, I think it was right to say that, because I think it happened. But now, it's not saying that. Not because they're pretty sure, the leaders are pretty sure that there are not some problems, but because they want to assure that you can go there, your vote is secret, nobody would know what you're voting, who you're voting for, and the electoral council is credible. That's the message. Not because they thought talking otherwise would promote abstention. That's the message of the opposition. Some people, including myself, thought that saying the problems that the electoral system had and has wouldn't promote the abstention, but would promote changes in the electoral system. But I was part of a minority that wasn't heard, and the stance of the opposition is this that you mentioned. And that's the way in which it is working. Secondly, about the message of Capriles. He is saying nothing that you have got is going to be suppressed. And this assurance may be working because we have the figures going up for Capriles. And that's a trade-off. I wouldn't say what he's saying, because that's a burden for his would-be presidency. Because if he promises what he is promising, well, I don't know how he can afford it. Well, he may explain the situation is different than we thought. But it is working. I have to admit that his campaign is working. Promising that he's going to keep everything that people got from Chavez, and saying you have to be confident in the electoral council and the electoral process, because every vote is going to be counted. That's what is going to happen. We'll see this Sunday if that strategy worked. But I don't know if it is working.
Yes, hi, my name is Richard Strauss Morales. I'm a Massachusetts attorney and also a Venezuelan citizen that lived and worked in Venezuela during the 80s and the 90s, specifically in PDVSA. My question to Dr. Blanco is, as a proponent of the decentralization that took place in the 1990s, which pretty much led to almost a vacuum of power, which gave rise to many political parties. Dr. Caldera was voted in as president. There was the phenomenon of the chiriperos, or many, many different political parties. And because there was this a similar aspect of the institutions not functioning in the 90s, and it had gone on during the late 80s and the 90s, that led to a strong man like Chavez to be elected, and for institutions or power centers in the back, in the background, to support a person like a character like Chavez, a strong man, to maintain order in the country. If it wasn't Chavez, it would have been somebody else. My question to you is this: the effect of Chavez reversing that decentralization process of the monies going into the governorships, of the political parties having a face to the party, a face as opposed to a color of a party. Do you see that this certain vacuum, although there's a strong man in Caracas, there's a strong central government, institutions are controlled centrally, do you see that the possibility of a certain vacuum of power that the people perceive, because the institutions aren't working for a majority of the people, do you see that there's this possibility that candidate Capriles can fill this vacuum of power, as you see a lot of the not the one side or the other, but the ninis, the people that they're not one side or the other, but all the contrary, that are willing to say, listen, there is this vacuum of power, they see this wave, a possibility in the centers, in the city centers where there's the majority of the population. Is there a real possibility that even Chavez himself sees that there is a lack of governance, and therefore the possibility, the need for a change? Do you think that he sees that himself?
Well, we have an excess of government and a lack of governance in Venezuela nowadays. I would say that's another discussion, but we can explain Chavez because the heritage of Latin American caudillismo is there. In Venezuela specifically, because oil, and we have oil and the rent of oil coming from oil. And thirdly, because in the 1980s, mostly 1990s, political parties didn't assume the reforms that were needed, badly needed in Venezuela. Just a few of them passed, like decentralization, the beginning of decentralization, with election of governors and mayors. But Venezuela badly needed an overhaul of its political system and its economic and social system as well. And the parties, the leaders, the elites didn't see that. Let me say that Chavez came to power not because the poor, but because the elites, Venezuelan elites, promoted him as the savior of the country, as the one that was going to renovate the political system. So I think explanations are more complex on why Chavez is there. And regarding to decentralization, I think you're right, there is a vacuum. And the vacuum has been filled by three instruments. First, the communal power. You know, this kind of power or base organization controlled by the presidency, financed directly by the president office. Secondly, the militias. This new fifth force that is kind of separate of regular armed forces, and that is politically and ideologically committed to Chavez. And thirdly, his, referring to Chavez, his powerful leadership. There hasn't been a leader like Chavez for a while in Venezuela. So these three elements grab the control of the country. Without Chavez, there is a real vacuum. And I would say, and I would agree with you, that the only solution is, of course, including everyone, not only the opposition parties and groups, but even the Chavistas. Some Chavistas groups that may want to, to continue as democratic organizations. But decentralization, to devolve again many of the rights and attributions that the governors and mayors had, and they were taken away by Chavez. I think that's the only way. And let me say and conclude this, I think the real barrier that Chavez had to control everything in Venezuela has been decentralization. What is left on decentralization is not that much, but what is left is the sense that the states and the cities had some power that should be conserved, kept from the national government.
But just to follow up, the national government controls the budgets that goes to the states and from the states to the cities, and isn't that where the power of the decentralization was rolled back through the control of the Constitution states that percentage of the regular income of national has to be given to the states and cities. So Chavez, the national government, gives it, reluctantly, late. They do that. But something interesting is that they calculate the budget with some unreal price of oil, like $50 per barrel. So they can have as extraordinary income what is over $50 per barrel, and the price now for Venezuela is more than $100 per barrel. So this is taken away, not given to the states, the percentage to the states, and is taken in special funds administered by Chavez directly. And nobody knows what's the amount and what it's used for. That's his cash cow. Millions and millions and billions of dollars are there in those funds.
We have another question here. And then
Guilherme Werner, I'm from Brazil. I'm a scientist at the Harvard School of Public Health. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just curious about if you think there will be any role in this situation that election result that is disputed. Like, for instance, if Capriles wins for a small margin, if the other Latin American leaders, what they will do, if they will say anything. I don't know. Brazilian leaders, ex-President Lula and to a lesser extent Dilma, they always were very supportive to Chavez's discourse. So if Capriles win by a small margin and Chavez alleged like a fraud, would these leaders just support Chavez and decided not to accept the result? What do you think about it?
Well, I think the only two leaders in Latin America that could do that, supporting Chavez as winner without actually winning the election, are Daniel Ortega and Evo Morales. I don't see Cristina Kirchner, Dilma Rousseff, even Correa, Mojica supporting a different situation. Actually, there is an information that was given to me recently that Cristina Kirchner talked to Chavez on behalf of Dilma Rousseff too, saying, Chavez, we support you, we love you, but you have to win. If you don't win, you don't win. I think these countries, the role that Brazil is playing in the world is not going to be, meddled by these petty politics in Venezuela. Although Venezuela is very important for many, including some companies in Brazil, I would say Dilma would play that game. On the contrary, I would think this Chavez's friends would call Chavez, hey, be quiet, we're your friends, we're still your friends, but don't mess this up. There was another.
Yes, please, and thank you for your excellent presentation. I have a comment and followed by a question. You made an excellent point when you said that dictators will not willingly submit to democratic elections unless they know they can win. And then you made the comparison with Daniel Ortega. Actually, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Linda Tomas. I'm a graduate student here at Harvard, but I had a previous career in Latin America. And so when you made that point, it reminded me I had been designee for the press attaché for the U.S. Embassy in Nicaragua in 1989, with specific responsibility for arriving in country to observe or to help coordinate the observer missions for that election, the first free democratic election since the Sandinista regime took over in 79. So this would have been in the fall of '89. And so when we were coordinating the press and the observation of the elections, but also to set up the international observer missions that were coming into country to observe the transparency and to monitor the transparency of those elections. Oddly enough, this is one of the ways that elections can be manipulated, because Ortega certainly could not guarantee or could not control the presidential process, but obviously tried to control the transparency of the presidential process. And in this particular case, all of us were denied diplomatic visas, so I waited for mine for 8 months, and so did not ever receive one. The same thing, emptied out the press office there. And of the 41 employees, U.S. employees of that embassy, we're down to 16. So to make that observation, well, the missions of supporting the electoral process difficult at best. And so that's my comment to say, yes, this happens in other ways. But my question in this case comes back. I'm wondering, in the current situation, are either of the parties receiving, or candidates receiving assistance from abroad, either in the, from like-minded political parties, from their sister parties around the world, or directly in terms of financing?
Well, this is dramatic in Venezuela because with the new constitution of 1999, the Chavista constitution, there are not public funds for political parties. There cannot be international funds for political parties. And private funds could be a demonstration of conspiracy. So the way in which political parties are financed are, through strange ways. Of course, it can create suspicion on the funds, of the origin of the funds, or who is financing it. For instance, there were some groups financed by the NED, National Endowment for Democracy, and they were accused of
Treason.
being
Of treason.
of treason. So it's pretty difficult on this regard. Of course, money goes through different ways, and but cannot be openly shown to the even to the electoral council, I guess. Regarding to the observers, Venezuela now doesn't accept observers, but acompañantes. I don't know how you would translate that. It's not the same status, because observers can talk, say, observe, and acompañantes cannot. They have to be shut up, they cannot say anything, they have to go to the electoral council to have, should they have any observation on the process, and well, that's just
That's the reason why the Carter Center decided not to participate, because they didn't like that kind of status. They said, we are either observers or not, so
Yeah.
they're not there.
The Carr-Ryan Center has its history in Venezuela.
Oh, yeah, but in this
Yeah,
case,
in
they
this
decided
case.
not to. Not to come. Do we have any more questions here? Well,
Just-
yeah, sure, please.
Not really a question, just a wish. It would be so interesting to get a postmortem on Monday morning. If you could schedule something like that, I would think that would be very interesting.
Oh, for sure, he won't be here, but we can try it, sure.
Oh, you won't be here.
No, but
Oh, you're leaving
next
Wednesday.
week, next week,
The following week, so we could have
I will be here, and of course.
yeah, we can do that. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And to talk about, postmortem.
That's why I said it was better to talk to some event that is going to happen within a year, because we won't be together again. But within a week, we'll be together, all of
And
us.
it's more fun after you hear so much of conjecture. I mean, that's all we have now.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's going to happen, and then to analyze it with facts on the ground later, that would be very, very interesting.
I can be with you on the 17th. If you
Okay, we'll plan for
we
something.
can plan.
Yeah.
A very quick question concerning your social circles and discussions in Venezuela that may be-
Recommendation to change them?
No, in the background. Is there any chatter as to certain sectors of the military if they would support, even if it were a small difference of a Capriles victory, would there be, is there a command possible outside of what Chavez has set up within the military structure right now of very straight shooter military minds that would say that they would support an electoral victory by Capriles, even if it were small? Because that's important in Venezuela.
I think if Capriles wins by one vote and can be demonstrated, the military would support him. I think that, since the Treaty of Rome and the human rights issues for the military in Latin America, and also in Venezuela, is very important to abide by the law. So if we have, the Latin American military is always problematic, as Chavez has demonstrated, but I think nowadays the attitude of most of the military officers in Venezuela would be to abide by the law. If the electoral council says Capriles won, that's it. If says Chavez won, that would be the last word. The problem is the electoral council says something that is different on what the Capriles side has. That could be problematic. If the electoral council says Capriles won, the military will support him. There could be some violence in the streets, but I guess could be controlled. The problem is what is going to say the electoral council. Well, I want to thank you for having me here.